The corridors of the Navio Clara's quarters hummed with the muted vibrations of an ancient starship. It was a relic of a forgotten era, its hull older than the nations it now served. Age was hidden beneath careful maintenance and layers of gleaming alloys, but the ship never let anyone forget it was alive, old, and heavy with history. The low thrum of its reactor was like a heartbeat, steady and unavoidable. Inside the lounge, the silence was broken not by alarms or weapons fire, but by the simple act of pouring juice. Cynthia, her blue armor dimmed to a softer silver sheen while at rest, leaned over a carved crystalline decanter. She poured a glass of guava juice, pink and alive with tiny seeds drifting lazily within. She handed it to her closest friend, Princess Clara Astor, who had demanded it with a mischievous smile only hours ago. Clara accepted it eagerly, her golden hair catching the dim light like strands of fire. She lifted the glass as though it were treasure. "You are far too pleased with yourself, Clara," Cynthia said, her voice carrying the careful sternness of a soldier who had been trained never to forget her duty. Clara took a long sip, her eyes fluttering closed, lips curved in pleasure. The guava's sweet tang filled her tongue. To her, this was more than just a drink. It was victory in the small, quiet battles that kept her sanity intact aboard this ship. "I have earned the right to be pleased," Clara replied, licking the last drop from her lips. "Do not deny me joy or I'll start sulking, and you know how dreadful that gets." Cynthia snorted, unable to hide a faint smile. She poured herself a glass and drank half of it in one go. The sweetness was foreign, too rich, yet refreshing against the recycled air of the Navio. The quiet was broken by a laugh, high, chirpy, and alien. "Obvious, yes, very obvious. Pretty eyes is far too happy," came the voice. From across the table, Jincho, the auntie engineer, tilted his avian head and opened his sharp beak. His feathers shimmered faintly under the glow of the overhead lights, 6 insect-like eyes blinking in pairs. Without ceremony, he poured the entire contents of his glass down his throat, letting the juice slosh and gurgle audibly. When finished, he dragged his long tongue along the rim of the glass with a sound that made Cynthia narrow her eyes. "There is more," she said flatly, reaching for the jar with a glare. "If you must humiliate yourself further, "Insolent creature, pa," Jincho interrupted, raising one feathered arm as though offended. "Terrible title, dull, try again, be creative." "Pest then," Cynthia muttered, though her hand still refilled his glass. "Better, more bite, but not good enough." Jincho tipped the glass again, and once more it was empty in seconds. "More, please." Clara laughed, the sound carrying warmth and a touch of desperation. Laughter had become rare in these uncertain days. "Must you provoke her so much?" she asked him. "Yes," Jincho answered cheerfully. The exchange would have seemed trivial to an outsider. A princess, her bodyguard, and an alien technician bantering over fruit juice. Yet beneath it, the air carried tension thick as fog. Clara's eyes kept darting toward the sealed screen at the end of the chamber. Cynthia's fingers tapped against her glass, restless, sensing danger even when none appeared. And Jincho, for all his antics, watched them both carefully with all 6 of his eyes. They were waiting. The conversation shifted, as it often did, toward work. Clara praised Jincho for the miracle he had pulled off only hours ago, restoring the shattered remains of Maximilian's old fighter. It would never fly again, but he had preserved it, rebuilt it, and gifted it back to her. For a moment, Clara had looked like a child again, eyes wide as she ran her hands along the restored cockpit, imagining herself a pilot. Jincho waved away the gratitude. Overdesigned but powerful, many secrets in its bones, ideas to apply, first prototypes ready tomorrow. "You trust him to test them?" Clara asked, mimicking his cheerful tone. "Yes, Worm will pilot. Only 5% chance of explosion." Clara nearly choked on her juice. Cynthia set her glass down so firmly it rattled. 5%. "Small number, practically safe," Jincho replied with unshakable pride. Their laughter filled the chamber for a moment, but Clara's smile did not last. She leaned forward, the playfulness slipping away like a mask torn off. The princess's expression hardened into something cold, something royal. Cynthia recognized it instantly, the look of a leader preparing to ask for truths that might wound. "Jincho," Clara began slowly, "you've done much for me and for the principality. Now I must ask more, something heavier." The auntie stilled, his wings twitching. "Ask." Cynthia activated the screen with a tap of her wrist. 2 recordings appeared, playing in silence. The first was clean, altered, a nobleman executed with apparent dignity. The second was raw truth, The same man, Frederick Anderson, convulsing as blood and brain leaked from his nostrils, ears, and eyes. A grotesque death. When the recordings ended, the silence weighed heavier than any reactor thrum. Jincho's feathers bristled. I've seen this before, 2 times only. Execution of traitors, Arabian Commonwealth method, high ranks only. Impossible, Cynthia muttered. We've captured hundreds of their operatives over the years. None died like this. You do not fight near their core. You skim their borders, harass their ships, steal from their fringes. But the center, the nobles, that is where the cruelest secrets live. Your nation has not seen it. Clara's fingers tightened around her glass. So Frederick Anderson was killed in a way reserved for their own traitors, which means... Jincho nodded gravely. Means you have an Arabian agent hiding within your traitors' ranks, skilled, subtle, dangerous. The air in the chamber shifted. Cynthia's hand drifted near the hilt of her blade, a habit when she smelled danger. Clara exhaled, her mask cracking for a second to reveal the fear beneath. Can you confirm this? She pressed. Can you swear it beyond doubt? Jincho tilted his head, tongue flicking. He stayed silent for a long, agonizing minute, then closed his beak. I cannot confirm, but I cannot deny, probability very high. Clara leaned back, the weight of those words settling in her chest like stone. The principality was already fractured with traitors. If the Arabians had infiltrated them too, it meant enemies within enemies, daggers behind every ally's smile. For a moment Clara looked younger than her years. Then havoc is coming, she whispered. Jincho reached out suddenly and without hesitation embraced her. His wings twitched awkwardly as he patted her head like a hatchling. Cynthia nearly drew her sword, but Clara only sat there, stunned. Emotional support embrace, Jincho declared. Different for Yakanti and humans, but helps, yes. Clara laughed weakly through her fear. Cynthia looked like she wanted to melt into the floor, but at last, she allowed Jincho to hug her too. They looked ridiculous, a princess, her armored bodyguard, and a feathery engineer locked in a clumsy circle of comfort. But for that fragile moment, the fear receded. Then the screen flickered again. Another file appeared unbidden, not from Cynthia's device, not from Clara's orders. A distorted voice filled the room. You are too late, Clara. The Arabians are already here. The screen went black. The words hung in the air like poison gas. You are too late, Clara. The Arabians are already here. The screen snapped black, leaving only the faint glow of the overhead lights and the unrelenting hum of the Navio's reactor. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Clara's fingers trembled around her glass, guava juice rippling inside like liquid light. Cynthia's hand gripped the hilt of her blade so tightly her knuckles turned pale against the steel. Jincho's 6 eyes darted across the walls as if trying to see beyond metal. Where did that come from? Clara asked, her voice low and steady, though her throat burned. Cynthia immediately swept her arm across her console. The screen flickered back to its default state, but her frown deepened. No source traceable, no signature in the signal. It bypassed all encryption. Impossible, Clara whispered. Nothing is impossible, Jincho corrected grimly. His feathers flared, his head twitching side to side. It came from within, not outside the ship, a ghost voice hidden inside your own walls. Clara stood, her royal mask slipping fully into place now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold fire that made Cynthia straighten instinctively. If that is true, then someone is listening. Someone is here. Silence again, but this silence was heavier, more dangerous. Jincho clicked his beak. Pretty eyes, hungry eyes, we must leave this chamber, now. Cynthia was already moving, her instincts screaming. She sealed the door with a code and drew her blade, motioning Clara behind her. Princess, with me. But Clara did not hide. She looked at the black screen one more time before turning to her companions. The Arabians have already infiltrated my uncle's faction. If they are inside the Navio as well, she trailed off, but they all knew the truth. No one was safe. The corridors of the Navio were never truly silent. Pipes hissed, conduits pulsed faintly with energy, and distant clangs echoed from the engineering decks. But tonight, the sounds carried a sinister edge. Every hiss felt like a whisper, every clang like a footstep following just behind. They moved together, Clara in the center, Cynthia leading, Jincho bringing up the rear. The auntie's feathers shivered constantly, his senses stretching out for disturbances no human could detect. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "To the Eternal Garden," Cynthia answered. "The inner communications hub. If the signal originated inside, we'll find its path there." "The Eternal Garden is monitored by loyalists," Clara said, doubt lacing her tone. "Loyalty is what's in question tonight," Cynthia countered. Jincho bobbed his head. "Hungry Eyes is correct, must dig into the roots of this tree. Ghost Voice may still be hiding." As they walked, Clara's thoughts spun. She had always known enemies surrounded her brother's throne. Treachery, betrayal, even assassination attempts. Those were old games, familiar dangers. But the Arabian's hand? That was something different. They were shadows made flesh, masters of infiltration. If their fingers were here in her uncle's rebellion and now inside her own ship, then every alliance was tainted, every victory hollow. The trio entered a lift that hummed downward, deeper into the ship's spine. Cynthia kept her blade half-drawn, ready for ambush. Clara leaned against the wall, forcing her breathing steady. Jincho crouched low, his claws scraping faintly against the deck. When the lift opened, the Eternal Garden awaited. The hub earned its name from its appearance. A vast chamber filled with towering conduits that glowed green and gold like bioluminescent trees. Thin streams of data pulsed up and down their lengths, flowing like sap. The chamber smelled faintly of ozone and metal, mixed with the synthetic sweetness of recycled air. Dozens of officers and technicians moved among the trees, their uniforms crisp, their faces lit by shifting lights. Normally, Clara found the sight oddly calming. Tonight, it felt alien, untrustworthy. The moment they stepped inside, silence spread. Every eye turned to her. A princess entering the hub unannounced was unusual enough. Arriving flanked by her armed bodyguard and an anti-engineer with feathers bristling like knives was another matter entirely. Clara raised her chin, her voice ringing with authority. "By order of the Principality, I require immediate access to the primary communications array." The chief operator, a broad-shouldered man with cybernetic lenses instead of eyes, stepped forward, bowing stiffly. "Of course, Your Highness, but forgive me, what is the urgency?" Before Clara could reply, Jincho clicked his beak loudly. "No questions, show us the routes." Cynthia's hand rested on her blade once more, silencing any further hesitation. The operator swallowed and gestured for them to follow. They reached the core array, a massive crystalline pillar rising from the floor, its surface alive with flowing data streams. Clara felt the weight of 1,000 secrets stored within. If the intrusion had come from inside the ship, this was where it had passed. Jincho pressed his feathered hand against the pillar. His eyes narrowed, pupils dilating in strange, unsettling patterns. His beak clicked rapidly as if whispering to himself. "What do you see?" Clara asked softly. "Patterns," Jincho murmured. "Too neat, too perfect, like silk threads woven by invisible spider." Cynthia frowned, meaning someone is hiding. They buried their voice inside your own systems. Clever, very clever, almost beautiful. Then without warning, the entire chamber dimmed. The glowing trees flickered, officers gasped. On the pillar, letters began to appear, glowing blood red across the crystal surface. A message. "We see you." Gasps spread through the chamber. Clara's breath caught. Cynthia shoved her in front of her, blade fully drawn now. Jincho let out a harsh trill, his feathers rising like spikes. The red letters shifted again. "You will fail." The power in the chamber surged, then cut. Darkness swallowed them whole. For one terrifying second, there was only silence. Then came the screams. Panels exploded in sparks. Officers shouted in confusion. Clara stumbled, reaching blindly for Cynthia's arm. Jincho's feathers lit faintly with bioluminescence, casting eerie shadows. "Sabotage," Cynthia barked. "Protect the princess." But even as she spoke, shapes moved in the dark. Figures emerging from the aisles between the glowing conduits, not officers, not crew. Their movements were too precise, too predatory. Cynthia raised her blade, its edge glowing blue in the dim. Jincho let out a shrill war cry, wings spreading. Clara's heart pounded as the figures stepped closer. One of them spoke, voice mechanical and cold. "Arabians serve no throne but their own. Tonight, princess, you join the dead." The Eternal Garden plunged into chaos. Screams echoed through the chamber as the glowing conduits, once pillars of calm green and gold light, flickered violently between red and black. Sparks rained down like artificial fireflies, scorching uniforms and setting the recycled air thick with the stench of burnt insulation. From the shadows, the infiltrators emerged. 5 of them, tall, precise, and wrong. Their armor was matte black, flowing with faint crimson veins that pulsed like living flesh. Their faces were hidden behind helmets sculpted into blank expressions. Arabian infiltrators. Cynthia stepped forward without hesitation, blade glowing blue, her stance firm. "Princess, behind me." Clara obeyed, but she didn't cower. She moved with control, back straight, eyes locked on the enemy. If she was to die here, she would do so as a princess of the principality, not a frightened child. Jincho crouched low, wings unfurling like a predator ready to strike. His 6 eyes glowed faintly, and his talons dug into the deck plates. The leader of the infiltrators raised a hand. "Surrender the princess and the ship survives. Resist, and we burn this garden to ash." "You'll burn regardless," Cynthia spat, then lunged. The first clash shook the chamber. Cynthia's blade met the infiltrator's curved weapon, a shimmering crescent of plasma wrapped in a magnetic field. Sparks exploded as steel met alien tech. Another infiltrator darted to flank her, but Jincho was already in motion. With a shrill cry, he leapt, feathers slicing the air like razors. His talons found the enemy's shoulder, tearing through armor with a metallic screech. Blood hissed as it hit the air, vaporizing instantly. The technicians screamed and scrambled for cover. Some ran, others tried to stabilize the failing conduits. Clara stood amidst the chaos, her mind racing. She had no weapon, no training in combat like Cynthia, no natural ferocity like Jincho, but she had her voice and her will. "Seal the exits," she shouted to the frightened operators. Cut off every door but one, herd them toward it. Fearful eyes turned toward her, but her tone left no room for refusal. Slowly, shakily, the technicians obeyed. Cynthia parried a strike, her blade slicing across an enemy's thigh. The infiltrator did not scream, did not falter, only pressed forward with mechanical precision. She gritted her teeth. These were no common soldiers. These were assassins bred for silence and slaughter. "Clara," Cynthia barked, "stay down." "I am not leaving you," Clara retorted. Her heart pounded, but her voice did not break. "Finish them, Cynthia." 2 infiltrators broke off, turning their focus on the princess. Jincho intercepted one with a leap, but the other advanced, weapon raised. Clara froze. The weapon gleamed red, humming with a low growl. Time slowed. Then instinct. She grabbed the nearest object, her abandoned glass of guava juice. In one desperate motion, she hurled it at the attacker's face. The liquid splashed across the visor, seeds and pulp sticking to the cracks of the helmet. The infiltrator faltered only for a moment, but it was enough. Cynthia was there, blade flashing blue, carving through the enemy's neck. The body crumpled, headless, guava seeds still clinging to the armor. Clara gasped, staring at her own hand. The ridiculous act had bought them a heartbeat, and in battle, a heartbeat was everything. Jincho shrieked as he drove his talons deeper into his opponent, ripping out wires and tubing that pulsed like veins. The infiltrator convulsed and collapsed, sparks bursting from its armor. 3 remained. The leader advanced, weapons spinning in deadly arcs. Cynthia met him head-on, her blade clashing again and again in a storm of sparks. He was stronger, faster. Every strike forced her back an inch, sweat beaded on her forehead, her muscles burned. "Too strong," Jincho hissed. "Not human speed, augmented heavily." "Then we break him," Cynthia growled, pushing forward with a roar. But the infiltrator twisted, faster than her eyes could follow, and slammed a fist into her chest. The impact sent her crashing into a conduit. The glow flickered wildly, energy surging out in arcs of static that danced across her armor. "Cynthia," Clara screamed, rushing forward, but Jincho blocked her path, wings spread. "No, Hungry Eyes, fight still, but you must live." The remaining infiltrators closed in, hemming them against the core pillar. Clara's mind raced. Trapped, outnumbered, Cynthia hurt, Jincho surrounded. Then a thought struck her. The conduits. She looked at the technicians cowering nearby. "Can you overload the system?" she demanded. One stammered, "Oh, overload? Princess, that would fry half the hub." "Do it," Clara ordered. "Overload the core now." The technician hesitated until Jincho screeched, eyes flashing, feathers rattling with menace. "Obey the princess, or die anyway." Terrified, the technician slammed his hands onto the console. Warnings screamed across the displays. The conduits pulsed violently, their glow brightening to a blinding intensity. The infiltrators froze for a fraction of a second. That was all Cynthia needed. She lunged from the side, blade sinking into the leader's side. Sparks erupted. The infiltrator roared the first sound it had made and backhanded her across the chamber. She hit the deck hard, blood spraying from her mouth. "Cynthia," Clara cried. The leader staggered but did not fall. His armor smoked, leaking fluid, but he raised his weapon again. The other two moved with him, closing in for the kill. The conduits screamed, energy building to catastrophic levels. The floor vibrated beneath their feet. Clara's hair whipped around her face from the static charge. "Now," she shouted. The technician slammed the final command. The eternal garden exploded in light. Energy ripped through the conduits like lightning through trees, arcing across the chamber. Panels shattered, glass burst, metal groaned. The infiltrators convulsed as red electricity crawled across their bodies. One screamed as his armor melted into his flesh, collapsing in a smoking heap. Clara shielded her eyes, the world turning white and gold. Heat washed over her. Her ears rang with a shrill note that drowned out all else. When the light faded, the chamber was a ruin. Conduits hung shattered, spilling molten data crystal onto the deck. Smoke choked the air. Two infiltrators lay dead, burned and broken. But the leader still stood. His armor blackened, his movements slower but alive. He raised his weapon, its glow sputtering yet still deadly. Cynthia groaned, trying to rise but collapsing again. Jincho hissed, feathers singed, one wing dragging uselessly. Clara stood alone, trembling, facing the surviving assassin. He lifted his weapon toward her. "Your death was written before you were born." Clara's lips trembled, but she met his gaze. "Then I will rewrite it." The assassin lunged, and then the deck beneath them buckled with a deafening crack. The floor collapsed, dropping Clara and the assassin into the burning abyss below. The fall felt endless. Metal screamed around Clara as the deck split beneath her. She tumbled into blackness, heat licking her skin, sparks bursting like dying stars in the void. Her body slammed against broken conduits, then bounced from a collapsed strut. Pain flared white-hot, but instinct drove her arms forward, clawing for anything. Her hand found a cable, and she clung to it with every ounce of strength, her body jerking to a halt just before the abyss swallowed her. The assassin wasn't so far. His blackened armor clanged against the wreckage, sparks trailing him as he crashed onto a lower platform. Clara heard the crunch of metal and the hiss of cooling circuits. He moved, slow but alive. Her grip trembled. The cable burned her palms. She swung once, twice, then let go, dropping onto a graded walkway 3 meters below. The impact jarred her bones. Her ankle throbbed, but it held. Smoke coiled around her, thick and choking. The lights down here were dim, sickly yellow strips flickering like dying candles. The air reeked of scorched insulation and copper blood. Clara forced her breathing steady. She had no weapon, no armor, nothing but her voice, her wits, and the raw stubbornness that had carried her through court intrigues deadlier than most battlefields. But politics had never required her to face an Arabian assassin in the dark. A metallic groan echoed above. Something shifted. The assassin's silhouette appeared through the haze, broad shoulders, weapon sparking faintly. "You fall," he said, voice distorted through the damaged helmet. "But you will not run. There is nowhere to run." Clara backed against a support beam, heart pounding. Her ankles screamed with every step. She scanned the wreckage desperately. Pipes, broken conduits, shards of crystal, no blade, no gun, nothing that could truly kill. But she didn't need to kill. She needed to survive. Cynthia's voice echoed in her memory. Every object can be a weapon if you have the will to use it. Clara's hand closed around a jagged shard of conduit crystal. Its edges glowed faintly with residual energy, still humming like a trapped heartbeat. Dangerous, volatile. The assassin moved closer, step by step, like a predator savoring the chase. "Your brother's throne will crumble. Your name will be forgotten. Only the Commonwealth endures." Clara raised the shard. Her arm trembled, but her eyes did not. "If you know me, assassin, then you know I do not shatter easily." The assassin lunged. Clara sidestepped, swinging the shard with all her strength. It scraped across his armor, sparks flying. He grabbed her wrist, twisting. Pain ripped through her arm. She cried out, but refused to let go. The shard pulsed, then it detonated. A burst of energy flared between them, throwing both across the platform. Clara slammed into a railing, the breath punched from her lungs. The assassin skidded against the deck, armor smoking again. He rose slower this time. Clara coughed, every bone aching, but she forced herself upright. "Good," he rasped. "Fight harder makes your death worthy." Her legs shook, but her will hardened. She thought of her brother, her father's lessons, of Cynthia bleeding above and Jincho burned. She thought of every child in the Principality who would never live free if the Arabians, shadows, spread unchecked. She would not give them the satisfaction of breaking her. The lower deck stretched before her like a labyrinth of rusted veins. She limped through narrow corridors, ducking under pipes and stepping over fallen debris. Every few seconds the ship groaned, shifting under its own wounded weight. Shadows danced with the flickering lights. Behind her, heavy footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate. He wasn't rushing, he was hunting. Her ankle gave way once, sending her sprawling. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Blood dripped from her palms where the crystal had burned her. She pushed forward anyway. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, the auxiliary coolant reservoir. Enormous tanks loomed above her, hissing faintly. Thin rivers of liquid pooled across the grated floor, reflecting the flickering lights. Clara's eyes darted. Coolant was toxic, flammable. One spark and the whole chamber could erupt. The assassin entered behind her, stepping into the pools without hesitation. His armor hissed where the coolant touched, but he advanced. Clara circled one of the tanks, her breath ragged. She spotted a maintenance ladder leading up to a control panel. She forced her body to move, climbing rung by rung, ignoring the pain screaming through her ankle. "Run," the assassin said below. "Climb, hide, it does not matter, death waits at the top as well." She reached the panel, slamming her hand on the controls. Warning lights flared red. Pressure gauges climbed. The coolant lines rattled. The assassin paused, looking up at her. For the first time, he tilted his head, curious. "Will you kill yourself to deny me?" he asked. Clara's voice shook, but her words did not. "If my death starves you of victory, assassin, then it is worth it." His laugh was low, metallic, cruel. "Then you are already one of us." He raised his weapon, aiming at the ladder. Clara ducked as the plasma bolt seared past, molten metal dripping. She hit the final switch. The coolant tanks screamed. Steam burst from the pipes, filling the chamber in blinding fog. She slid down the ladder, landing hard, but the smoke covered her escape. The assassin's red visor glowed faintly through the mist. He moved slower now, wary. Clara crawled beneath the tanks, her body pressed against the wet floor, every breath tasting of acid. She reached for a fallen pipe, clutching it like a club, not much, but enough. The footsteps drew nearer. Her heart thundered. She gripped the pipe tighter, ready to swing. Then another sound. A faint clicking, mechanical, not the assassin. Clara froze. The assassin stopped as well, visor turning. From the shadows of the chamber, shapes emerged. Small, insect-like drones skittering across the walls and ceiling. Their bodies glowed faintly red, the same crimson as the infiltrator's armor. The assassin did not attack them. He tilted his head as if acknowledging allies. Clara's blood ran cold. These were not random machines. They were his scouts, his hunters. Dozens of them swarmed into the chamber, red eyes glimmering through the fog. The assassin raised his weapon toward Clara. "You are cornered, princess. Your friends cannot reach you here, and now neither can hope." The drones spread along the walls like a living rash of red lights. They clicked in harsh rhythm, each step a tiny blade against metal. Their bodies were palm-sized and low to the deck, with thin legs and bellies full of tools, micro-drills, cutters, and needle-thin injectors that gleamed when they caught the flicker of the dying lights. Their little lenses panned in unison toward Clara. The assassin did not hurry. He stood behind them like a shepherd of knives. Clara swallowed the taste of acid and coolant. Her chest stung where she'd slammed into the railing. Her ankle throbbed. She was alone and small in the vast belly of the ship, a human figure framed by towers of hissing tanks. She made herself breathe slow. "Think." Coolant mist swirled white and thick, beating on her lashes. The grated floor hummed faintly beneath her palms, current leaking through damaged conduits and pooling in the mesh like a shallow stream. Over her head, a maintenance bridge crossed between two tanks. To her left, a control plinth blinked with red warnings. To her right, a heavy coil of steel cable lay half unspooled, its end clamped to a hoist. Every object can be a weapon. The first rank of drones dropped from the wall to the floor. They came forward in a fan, testing the grid with delicate taps of their front legs. When the nearest reached a gleaming puddle, it paused, then scuttled around. Smart, programmed to avoid electrocution. Clara backed toward the cable. She tried not to limp. The assassin followed at a measured pace, the crackle from his wounded armor quiet but steady. His voice came low and flat through the helmet. "You are calm, good. It is harder to break calm prey." "I'm not prey," Clara said. The words came out thin but even. He raised a hand. The drone stopped as one. "Your nation taught you poise. It did not teach you mercy. You drove your own uncle to war." Clara's jaw clenched. He chose treason. The assassin tilted his head. Words, old paint on old rust. "Then come and test the metal," Clara said. She bent, grabbed the cable with both hands, and yanked. The coil screamed as it dragged across the grid. Sparks spit along the floor like hot rain. She hauled the cable through a puddle, across a jag of broken crystal, back again, drawing a long, bright scar through the mist. The little drones paused. Their lenses glowed brighter, thinking. Clara hooked the cable over the hoist drum, fed its free end through a guide ring on the maintenance bridge, and jerked down. The ring hummed, metal singing. She was building a loop, floor to ring to hoist to floor, a rough, ugly circuit. The assassin finally moved, stepping to the side to break sight lines, weapon ready. "Child tricks," he said. "You will burn first." "Maybe," Clara said, "but I won't burn alone." She darted to the control plinth and slammed the override. Pressure surged. The tanks wailed. Fine vapor erupted from safety valves in tight, cutting jets. Fog became blizzard. The cable trembled with charge. The grated floor shook. The assassin signaled. The drones leapt. They hit the grid in a scatter of red points, needle legs flicking with machine speed as they skirted the puddles and cracks. Clara saw the movement patterns, tight arcs and gaps planned by something cold and clever. They ran along the dry line, hunting the shortest path to her boots. She kicked the plinth. It shifted half an inch, enough to jolt its ground strap loose. The world snapped white. A spear of static jumped from the cable to the grid. It crawled along the mesh in a long, lightning tongue, licking into every gap the drones had mapped. The first rank seized and locked, little legs stiffening as their bellies flashed, then popped like angry seeds. The second rank tried to reverse, but the charge ran faster, herded by the loop into a corral that had not existed a breath earlier. 15 machines went dark in a breath. 8 more caught fire. The rest sprang for the walls. And Clara yanked the cable from the ring. The loop broke, the arc died. The last drone scuttled high, their bellies smoking. The grid glowed cherry in spots, then dimmed. Clara's hands shook. She had to fight the urge to throw up. The air smelled like hot coins and bitter fruit. "Better," the assassin said. "I expected tricks, you bring art." He did not raise his weapon. He didn't need to. 24 drones still clung to the walls and ceiling, red eyes bright, bodies intact. They spread, seeking new angles. Clara dragged the cable toward the nearest tank and hooked it to a valve wheel. The wheel was crusted with ancient paint and the kind of grease that never came off even in a starship bath. She leaned into it with her whole body until it creaked. A thin line of liquid hissed from the connection and beaded into the fog. The assassin stepped into it, unbothered. The coolant smoked against blackened plates, then ran down in milky streaks. "Do you know why we use you?" he asked. "Humans, you fit everywhere. You do anything for those you love. When guided, you become perfect tools." "I guide myself," Clara said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh and pointed. The ceiling drones lifted like a single flock and drifted off the wall, legs tucked tight. They passed through the fog without disturbing it. They were flying. Small propellers unfolded from recesses in their shells, silent as breath. They turned as one, aligned, and dropped in a line toward Clara's face. Clara threw herself backward. The first 2 hit the cable and bounced off. The third slashed her sleeve, needle leaving a cold itch on her skin. She swung the cable hard. 3 drones went wide and struck the grating. The next 4 compensated and went high. 1 kissed her cheek. Fire burned there a second later. Clara rolled under the bridge and came up on the other side. The assassin did not pursue. He just kept walking, slow and straight. His patience hurt more than a shout. Above, the drones turned and then held, snagging in place, frames locked 30 centimeters below the ceiling. Their little props spun against air, but they did not move. Clara blinked and heard a new sound, a thin, warbling whine under the tank noise. Not in the room, in the wall. Pretty eyes, a voice crackled through static. Do not move, do not breathe weird, do not explode. Jincho, Clara breathed. 2 decks above, Cynthia kicked a twisted beam out of a jammed hatch and sucked air past a split lip. The world around her still smelled like burned wire and skin. Her ribs ached where the assassin had struck her. She planted a hand on the edge of the hole and peered down into the coolant chamber's shadow. Jincho crouched beside a ruined conduit, feathers ash-gray where they had scorched. His injured wing hung at a bad angle, but both hands were busy. He had cracked open a junction box and jammed his data chit into its guts, skin on his temple folding back with the tiny sigh she had heard once before. Around the chit, he had strapped a fan from a dead cooling unit, a ring from a broken sensor, and 3 strips of torn display panel that buzzed like angry bees. "What is that?" Cynthia rasped. Jincho clicked his beak, eyes wide with glee. "A Screecher new prototype makes the air sing on a frequency drones hate, maybe also makes heads hurt, maybe also ruptures things, 5% chance of explosion." He paused. 7, new math. "Can you lower it?" Cynthia asked. "Lower what?" "The chance," she said. He considered, no. Cynthia closed her eyes for a beat and nodded, then let it sing. Jincho held the little contraption over the hole by a length of line and eased it down until it cleared the lip. He flicked a toggle with a nail. The Screecher's fan turned a fraction. The display strips shook. The air turned thin and sharp like a knife edge. Cynthia's teeth hurt. Far below, the ceiling drones froze at once, props stalling against something they could not push. Red eyes glared. One popped like a grape. Jincho's crest lifted in delight. "Works." "Then don't stop," Cynthia said, already knotting another line to her belt. "I'm going down." "You should wait," Jincho said. "Bones cracked, blood inside you, I can smell it." "Then I'll be careful," Cynthia replied and swung herself onto the ladder built into the shaft wall. Every rung found her ribs and pressed hard. Below, she could just see Clara's hair, damp strands stuck to a pale face, and the dark bulk of the assassin moving like a patient storm. Clara could breathe again. The flying drones were trapped against the invisible ceiling the Screecher had set, their props whining in a furious buzz. Several tried to reverse and dropped, straight into the cable arc she had left as a booby trap. 2 more landed on their backs and clicked helplessly. The assassin finally looked up. His visor reflected a faint quiver in the air as the field rippled. He tilted his head as if sniffing. "Auntie," he said, "of course." Clara's mouth twitched. "His name is Jincho." "Names are lies we tell ourselves," the assassin said and surged forward. He moved faster than before, a blur of black and red under the bridge. Clara brought the cable up to block. His weapon smashed it aside. The head of the staff glowed a sick, wet crimson that made her stomach turn. She ducked the second strike and jammed the cable hook toward a seam in his armor. It scraped sparks and found a vent. She twisted hard. The assassin grunted, short and displeased. He rammed a knee into her thigh. Pain burst white. Clara stumbled back into a tank. The metal rang. Her teeth rattled. "Clara," Cynthia's voice cut from above. It was hoarse and raw and full of life. "Left." Clara went left without thinking. The assassin's blade struck the space where her head had been and carved a glowing gouge into the tank's skin. Coolant hissed. A cold fog erupted in his face. He stumbled half a step, and Clara saw the joint in his side where Cynthia's earlier cut had broken a seal. She drove the cable hook into that spot. Something tore. The assassin roared. Not human, not machine, something between. Dark fluid jetted and steamed on his plates. He slammed a hand into Clara's chest, and the world went inside out. She flew 3 meters and hit the bridge support. The Screecher's tone climbed, turned brittle. Drones screamed like insects and dropped from the ceiling in a rain of failing red stars. "Hold," Jincho yelled somewhere over the edge. "Hold, hold, hold." Clara rolled to her knees and saw the assassin plant his feet wide. The gouge he had carved in the tank widened with a slow, wet moan. A safety seam popped. A valve snapped. A panel buckled and shot like a coin past Clara's head. Then the tank split. A white river blasted across the room. It hit the assassin first and hammered him backward into the far wall. It hit the bridge next and tore it from its mounts. The Screecher flipped, wrapped in its own line, and tumbled toward the flood. Cynthia dropped like a stone, caught the line with a bleeding hand, and let it rip the skin from her palm as it went tight. The Screecher swung and slammed into a crossbeam, hanging like a mad pendulum and still singing. The flood hit the purge gate. On good days, the purge system moved spent coolant into a sealed recycler. On bad days, it vented to space through armored shutters 2 decks down and 2 bulkheads out. Today was a bad day. The blast from the ruptured tank was enough to shear a jammed lock. Somewhere, a safety pin failed. The gate yawned. The first thing to move was air. It went past Clara's ears like an animal scream, invisible and huge. The fog snapped into a flat sheet and flew. Loose tools, dead drones, slabs of broken crystal, a coil of cable. Everything became a river headed for a black mouth at the base of the wall where the purge channel opened to the hull vent. Clara grabbed the bridge support. It tore her shoulder. She screamed and held. The assassin's boots clanged and stuck. Magnets. He stayed on his feet, biting into the deck like a beetle on glass. His visor turned toward Clara, then up toward Cynthia. He bent his knees and started forward against the wind, inch by inch. "Turn it off," Cynthia shouted over the gale. "I cannot," Jincho yelled back. "Valve broken, gate hungry." "Then close the shutter." "Shutter is dead," Jincho's crest slammed flat, "or sleeping." "Wake it," Cynthia said. "I am shouting at it." Clara's fingers slipped, her feet lifted. The wind grew teeth. It ate at her lungs and nose and eyes. She hauled one hand higher and felt skin peel. The screecher's tone wavered, cut out, then came back lower and harsher. The line holding it to the beam creaked. A drone, still alive, flew free of the ceiling and hit Clara's shoulder. Needles bit through her suit and skin. A hot, electric burn lanced into her nerve. She swung a hand and swatted it away. It went cartwheeling into the black mouth and vanished. The assassin reached the rail 20 paces from her. His magnet boots squealed with each step. The wound at his side leaked a steady line of dark that turned white in the wind, then missed. He lifted his weapon one-handed, aimed through the storm, and fired. The bolt went wide and burned a black crater in the wall a meter from Cynthia's hip. She flinched and held the screecher line tighter. Blood ran down her forearm and spattered her jaw. "Clara," she shouted, voice breaking on the name. "Look at me." Clara dragged her gaze up. Cynthia's eyes were winter blue and furious. "You hold," Cynthia said. "You are a princess, you hold." Clara nodded once. The simple order steadied her more than any plan. She pressed her chest to the beam and made her hands into steel. Jincho's head jerked. All 6 eyes focused past Clara at something low and wrong. He rasped a word in his own language that Cynthia had never heard him use. His crest bent toward the deck like a bow. "Pretty eyes," he said, soft and sick. "Do not look down." Clara looked down. The black mouth had teeth now, metal ribs that had not shown in the first blast. They flexed as pressure chewed at them, opening and closing, opening wider each second. Beyond them was not a recycler duct. It was stars. A jagged wound had opened somewhere beyond the purge channel and the shutter. Maybe the vent door had buckled. Maybe a meteor scar in the old hull had given way. Maybe sabotage had set this exact trap. It didn't matter. The chamber was venting to space through a crooked throat of ducts and ribs and broken doors, and the wind wasn't wind anymore. It was vacuum, hungry and alive. The deck groaned, 2 bolts sheared with gunshot cracks. The bridge support lurched and dropped 6 inches. Clara's stomach fell with it. The screecher swung wild, hit Jincho's shoulder, and stung him with his own sound. He snarled but did not let go of the line. The assassin lowered his head and pushed harder. He switched off his magnets, let the rush carry him 3 steps, then switched them on to catch the ground again. He was surfing the storm. He reached the beam opposite Clara, jammed his forearm through a gap, and leaned out over the tearing floor. He looked up at Cynthia again, then back at Clara. Through the cracked visor she saw eyes. Human eyes, dark and flat and old. He reached across the gap and took Clara by the ankle. His grip was iron. It crushed bone and blood in the same hand. He didn't pull yet. He just held her there and let the rush work on her fingers. "You do not shatter easily," he said. "Good." "Let go," Clara hissed. "In a moment," he said and squeezed. Clara's right hand slipped from the beam. She hung by 3 fingers in a pain that went far beyond skin. The stars in the black mouth widened. The deck bent like a bow. "Cynthia," she whispered. "I'm here," Cynthia said, voice low and fierce above the scream. "I'm here." Clara's last fingers slid. The assassin's hand closed harder on her ankle. The beam tore free. "Clara, the beam," the screecher, half the bridge, and a river of shattered metal shot toward the open night. The last thing she saw as the world turned to stars was Cynthia launching herself after her without a line, a blur of armor and wild blue eyes, and Jincho hurling his body across the gap to catch them both with a wing that could no longer fly. The black mouth swallowed them. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the roar of air turning to vacuum. Clara tumbled in a storm of debris, shards of crystal, dead drones, shredded metal. Her body spun, weightless, her lungs burning as pressure ripped at them. Stars stretched wide, framed by the jagged wound in the ship's belly. Her scream never left her throat. The void swallowed sound. A hand closed around her wrist, crushing, desperate. Cynthia! Her bodyguard had leapt without tether, without thought, armor glinting against the starlight. Clara saw her friend's blue eyes, fierce and unbroken even as the vacuum tore at them. Jincho followed, wings spread useless but body angled like a dart. His talons found Clara's shoulder. The auntie's 6 eyes burned like coals in the black. He screeched, no sound, but the vibration rattled through her bones. Together, they were a chain in a storm, spinning toward the edges of the duct, where jagged steel teeth waited to cut them into silence. The assassin came too. Magnet boots disengaged, he let himself be carried, surfing the vent like a predator riding a tide. His blackened armor sparked, his weapon still in hand. Even now, he reached not to save himself, but to seize her again. Clara clenched her teeth. No, not like this. They struck the first rib of the duct. Cynthia's armored shoulder took the blow, sparks flying. Jincho hooked one talon into a jagged seam, slowing their spin. Clara slammed against Cynthia's chest, the impact rattling her spine. The rib tore past them, then another. Jincho twisted his body, using the wreckage as anchor points. Each talon strike ripped skin from his fingers, but he never let go. Their wild tumble slowed into a jarring slide. The duct narrowed, funneling them downward. The stars shrank behind them, replaced by a throat of mangled steel. The assassin crashed behind, his armor shrieking as it scraped metal. He never lost his weapon. His visor glowed red in the dark. Cynthia pulled Clara tighter against her. Her lips moved, no sound, but Clara read it clearly. Hold. They struck a bulkhead. The impact knocked the breath from Clara's lungs. Pain screamed through her ribs. The force shoved them sideways into a narrow maintenance conduit that broke from the main vent. Jincho shoved with all 4 limbs, steering them into it. The assassin slammed into the bulkhead behind. The shock tore him from the current. Clara saw him tumble into the main stream, magnet boots scraping for grip. Then the black throat swallowed him, vanishing into the endless night. For the first time since the fall, Clara breathed. Air thin foul recycled, but air. The maintenance conduit was sealed. An emergency lock engaged when the purge gate ruptured. The 3 of them lay tangled in its cramped steel ribs, coughing, gasping, bleeding. Cynthia rolled first, dragging Clara into her arms. Her armor hissed, vents snapping shut as systems rebalanced. She pulled off her helmet, eyes wild, face pale with exhaustion. Princess, are you? Clara pressed her hand to Cynthia's mouth. Her own chest rose and fell like a hammer on iron, but her eyes were steady. Alive, she whispered. Because of you. Jincho slumped against the wall, feathers ragged, one wing bent wrong. He pressed a talon to the cracked slit in his skull where his augmentation lay. Sparks fizzed, then died. His beak clicked once. 5% chance, he muttered weakly. Closer to 20. Clara laughed, a sound halfway between relief and madness. Minutes passed before they spoke again. The conduit lights flickered faint orange, emergency mode. Pipes dripped condensation. The space was so narrow Clara's knees touched one wall and her back pressed the other. Where are we? Clara asked. Maintenance crawl, Cynthia answered, voice hoarse. Old section predates the retrofit, leads to... She stopped, frowning. To where? Clara pressed. Cynthia's jaw tightened. To the Eternal Garden's outer control node. Clara's stomach dropped. The very heart of the system that had been hijacked, where the message had appeared, where the infiltrators had first revealed themselves. Jincho groaned, forcing himself upright. His 6 eyes glowed faintly again, though dimmer. Then the ghost voice knows, it herded us here like prey. Clara shook her head, or like challengers. They crawled through the conduit, moving slow, every scrape of armor or talon echoing. Clara's body ached. Her arms shook each time she pulled herself forward, yet she did not falter. Cynthia stayed close behind, one hand never far from her blade. Jincho scuttled ahead, his bent wing dragging. The air grew colder. Moisture dripped heavier. The metal walls seemed older, rougher, as if no hand had touched them in decades. Finally, they reached a hatch. Its surface was covered in dust and old paint, Cyrillic letters half faded. Cynthia pressed an ear against it, listening. Nothing. She drew her blade, nodded once, and forced it open. Beyond lay a chamber vast and circular, a forgotten node of the ship. Consoles lined the walls, screens dark but humming faintly. In the center, a pillar of glassy crystal rose like a frozen tree. Data streams flowed within, pulsing faint red. The same red as the assassin's armor. Clara stepped inside, breath caught in her throat. "This is it," she whispered, "the root of the infection." Jincho's feathers bristled. "No, not infection, seed. Someone planted this long ago." The pillar flickered. A face appeared within the crystal, distorted, blurred, but human. Its eyes were pits of red light. Its mouth moved. "Clara Astor," it said. The voice was the same distorted whisper from before. "At last we meet." Clara's blood ran cold. "You know me," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "I know all who matter," the face replied. "But you matter most. The principality is a tree rotting from within. I water its roots." Cynthia raised her blade. "Identify yourself." The face turned slightly, ignoring her. "I was born in the Arabian Commonwealth, but I serve no throne, no master, only the pact of truth." Clara stepped closer. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Then why kill Frederick Anderson? Why infiltrate my uncle's rebellion? Why haunt my ship?" The face smiled, a thin, cruel curve. "Because only by tearing away lies do we see who you really are. You are not a princess, Clara Astor. You are the storm the principality fears, and I." The voice broke into static, then sharpened again. "I am the blade that carves your path." The pillar flared, alarms screamed. Cynthia shoved Clara back as the floor split, panels sliding apart. From the opening rose a figure clad in armor like the assassins, but taller, heavier, its visor glowing brighter. Not the same man, another. And not alone. Behind it, two more stepped out, weapons gleaming. Clara's breath caught. Her strength felt like glass against steel, yet she forced her voice steady. "Then let's see if your storm survives the fire." The three assassins raised their weapons as the pillar roared with crimson light. The chamber throbbed with crimson light, shadows crawling across the consoles like living veins. The central pillar pulsed with each heartbeat of the ship, its glow synchronized with the assassins that had risen from the floor. Three figures, black as midnight, stood in perfect formation. Their visors glowed blood-red, weapons humming with low menace. Clara stood at the center, flanked by Cynthia and Jincho. Her body ached from bruises, lungs stung from coolant and smoke, but her gaze was steady. She refused to bow. "Three of them," Cynthia whispered, blade raised. Her chest heaved with the strain of her cracked ribs. "I'll hold the first, Jincho the second, princess." "Don't you dare finish that thought," Clara cut in, voice sharp. "I fight too." The first assassin stepped forward, his weapon raised. "Resistance is vanity. You cannot break what was planted before your birth." Jincho hissed, feathers flaring. "Wrong, vanity is yours, pretty eyes breaks everything." And then the assassins moved. The clash was thunder in a steel cathedral. Cynthia met the first assassin head-on, her blade singing as it carved sparks across his armor. She twisted, ducked under his swing, then countered with a strike aimed for his visor. He parried with inhuman precision, each movement mechanical and exact. The second charged Jincho. The auntie let out a shrill screech, launching himself upward with his good wing flaring. His talons found purchase in the assassin's shoulder seam, ripping cables free. Sparks sprayed, but the assassin grabbed him by the throat, slamming him against a console. Jincho clawed back, his beak snapping dangerously close to the visor. The third assassin advanced on Clara. She had no blade, no armor, only her will. But her eyes darted across the chamber, the pillar, the conduits, the control panels flickering faint red. She remembered Jincho's words, seed. Someone planted this long ago. Seeds could be burned. She backed toward the pillar. The assassin followed, weapon raised. "Your struggle ends here, Clara Astor. You were not meant to survive this." Clara's hand found a panel inset at the base of the pillar. Its controls were alien to her, symbols she could barely recognize. But she remembered lessons drilled into her as a child. All systems, no matter how foreign, obeyed patterns of flow, energy, input, output. Her fingers hovered, the assassin lunged. She slammed the panel with her palm. The pillar screamed. Crimson light flared, surging up its crystalline veins. The assassins staggered as if struck, their visors flickering. Cynthia seized the opening, driving her blade into her opponent's leg. Jincho bit into the cables he had torn free, sparks exploding across his feathers. The assassin before Clara froze, weapon twitching in his grip. Clara stared into his visor. You said I wasn't meant to survive, but humanity never survives the way it meant to. We survive because we choose to. She yanked the panel free, exposing a glowing core beneath. The assassin reached for her throat. Clara ripped the core out. The pillar exploded in light. The assassins convulsed, red energy ripping through their bodies. The one before Clara shuddered, collapsing to his knees. Cynthia's opponent staggered, giving her the chance to drive her blade deep into his chest. Jincho's foe released him, thrashing wildly as sparks consumed him. The pillar cracked. Crimson veins bled into the walls, flickering, dying. The face that had taunted them screamed through static, its features warping into chaos. No, you don't know what you've done. I am not the seed, I am the root. The voice fractured into silence as the crystal shattered, spraying shards across the chamber. The assassins collapsed, smoking wrecks of flesh and machine. The chamber dimmed, the red glow died. For the first time since the Eternal Garden sabotage, the ship felt still. Silence hung heavy. Cynthia fell to one knee, blade clattering. She clutched her side, coughing blood. Clara rushed to her, cradling her shoulders. You stubborn fool, Clara whispered, tears burning at her eyes. You were supposed to protect me, not tear yourself apart. Cynthia smiled faintly, teeth stained red. Protecting you means standing with you. Don't forget that, princess. Jincho limped forward, his wing dragging, feathers half burned. He spat out a smoking cable. Ugly fight, beautiful ending. His beak clicked. Pretty eyes, hungry eyes, you both live, that's enough. Clara looked at them both. Her closest allies, broken but unbowed. Her chest swelled with something fierce and fragile all at once. We're not done, she said softly. The Arabians planted this seed. That means there are more, other ships, other routes. Cynthia frowned. Then we'll burn everyone. Clara shook her head. Not just with blades, with truth, with compassion, with allies who believe in something stronger than fear. Her gaze fell on Jincho. He tilted his head, 6 eyes glimmering. A pact, he asked. Clara extended her hand, palms scarred and bleeding. A pact. Cynthia placed her hand over Clara's. A pact. Jincho's talon joined theirs, rough and sharp, feathers brushing skin. A pact, he echoed, his voice carrying a rare weight of solemnity. In that ruined chamber, surrounded by shattered crystal and the corpses of assassins, 3 souls, human and alien, bound themselves to a promise. To fight together, to endure, and to carve a path through the storm. Later, as repair crews swarmed the wounded decks of the Navio, Clara stood at the viewport of her quarters. The stars stretched infinite, cold, and cruel. Somewhere among them, more seeds waited to be found, more roots to be burned. Cynthia stood silently at her side, her armor patched but her eyes still bright. Jincho perched on the edge of the console, tinkering with the fragments of the broken core. His feathers flared with excitement. Too many secrets, too many to ignore, but with us, maybe less dangerous. Clara smiled faintly. She lifted a fresh glass of guava juice, pink and alive with seeds drifting within. She raised it, looking between her friends. To the pact, she said. Cynthia smirked, clinking her glass against Clara's. Jincho tilted his beak, tapping his own against theirs. To the pact, they echoed. Clara drank deeply, the sweetness filling her tongue. A reminder that even in a galaxy of shadows and betrayal, there were still moments of warmth, still reasons to endure. And beyond the glass, the storm waited. But this time, she would face it with allies who would never let her stand alone.